This episode contains rude words.
Hey everyone, this week I've got Sabrina Hahn joining me. She and I talk about regreening spaces. We talk a lot about gardening, about soil health, about gardening on the cheap, her favourite plants, native wildlife, and murder, believe it or not. So listen in and hear what Sabrina has to say about all those topics. Are you a subscriber to our newsletter? We actually haven't done much in that field quite yet, but we are dedicated to bringing out a newsletter this year, once a month, just with some of our favourite things, some recaps of our episodes, some tips and tricks for the garden, and some practical things to implement permaculture into your life. If you want to join, jump on our Instagram. There's a link in the bio, and you can get a little dose of us in your inbox each month. Welcome to the Practical Permaculture Podcast, your weekly dose of gardening, intentional living, and all things permaculture, served with a side of fun and plenty of great conversations. I'm your host, Alysse, and together we'll dig into practical tips, chat with experts, and explore ways to cultivate a more abundant, sustainable life. Let's get growing! Hello everybody and welcome back to the Practical Permaculture Podcast. This is our first episode for 2025. I have had a massive break over summer. It was so needed and so spacious and lovely, and I sat with it and I was very intentional about it. Coming back to the podcast feeling very refreshed. We have a lot going on in our life at the moment. For those of you who have listened to the podcast for a while may know that I homeschool my children, and about 2 weeks ago, out of the blue, my eldest, who is 6, going into year 1, said, I want to go to school, Mummy. I want to make some friends and be a part of the school community. So we have been frantically looking at schools while they're closed. So, that's problematic. And I've had to sit with it a lot because it's a high value of mine to have the kids be kids and just grow up and have the nature around them and learn from nature and learn in our little family unit and from our experiences and what we do during the day. And it's something I wanted to do right through to high school. So her coming and saying this was a bit of a mirror to me. I had to look and reflect and sit with it and make sure it's what she really wanted, but it is. And so she's going off to school and my little man will be joining her. So he'll be going into kindergarten. So we've done a lot of growing and changing over the summer, and we just wanted to spend time together and really enjoy those last couple of weeks just as our little family unit and enjoy the last of our summer break. So yes, that's what I've been doing. Jo was on a cruise, so she was unable to join me today for our little intro chat. Don't fear, she'll be back. But yes, at the moment she's on holiday mode still, so we'll let her stay there a little bit longer. In gardening news, we went away for 3 weeks. We went to Adelaide to see some family and Fraser Island. Fraser Island was amazing, Kungari. It was a bit disappointing though. We saw so much rubbish and it made us really sad. In the caravanning camping world, people are whinging because sites are getting closed down all around Australia. There's a beach down in South Australia called Waralty that's recently closed because people are just trashing the environment and not leaving it in a very good state when they do leave. And yeah, the island was the same. There was microplastics all along the shore. There was soft drink bottles. There was jerry cans. There was just plastic and crap everywhere. It was really, really sad to see. Our kids kept commenting about it, which made me feel good that they noticed it. And we did lots of cleanups while we were over there. But yeah, it was really sad. And it makes me feel for the rangers and the tourists and the locals that they may miss out on things like this if people don't actually clean up and respect the environment. So yeah, that was kind of a bit of a low point. But after that, we headed to Newcastle and saw family and had some delicious time just eating too much and drinking too much and jumping in and out of the pool and just connecting and being with our family, which was oh so lovely. So yeah, that was my kind of summer break. But because we were away, we had Oscar's grandparents come and house sit for us up here in the Northern Rivers. And the irrigation stuff wasn't too bad, but there was a lot of stuff that didn't get watered. So my garden actually did not thrive this summer. I've got some very dead corn. So the corn saga continues after having sown it 3 times. It died anyway, and I don't think it will fruit. We've got tomatoes that are going bonkers, but I didn't trellis any of it, and our house sitters didn't either because it's not their job. So our tomatoes are all bent over. They're still very abundant, but I just wonder whether they're going to suffer a little bit. Probably need a really big prune. Probably need to stake them. But yeah, they're happy for now. We've got some volunteer eggplants that popped up, some volunteer pumpkins. There's a watermelon. I don't know whether that stuff's got enough water because they're not very large in size. So watch this space, whether we end up eating that harvest, whether it's tasty, I should say. Still have some possum problems, trying to cage everything when it pops up, but the pumpkins, because the leaves are quite large, I'm missing some, and so we are getting them nibbling on some things still. I've just kind of left the ones that they're eating on the vine to kind of encourage them and give them that to go to rather than finding new things on the block. Our flowers are doing really well, so that's nice to see. But we're coming into February up here, which means rain season. So they call it a floody February up here. I remember last year it rained for nearly 8 weeks straight. So we'll see how much gardening gets done. We'll see the impact of that rain on the garden. I feel like it's going to be more negative than positive, maybe leaching a lot of stuff out of the soil. I think I need to start collecting seaweed and thinking about other amendments I can add to my soil to just give it that boost and a little bit more health because, yeah, I think it's all just going to get leached out with the rain. We're currently remulching everything. Things got really dry here. We've had a few things die in the garden, some little trees, things like that. And more broadly, permaculture at the pub starting back up in February up here. So that will be lovely to see some people at permaculture at the pub. And we've just been connecting with our community a lot and spending lots of time with some friends. So that's our little permaculture life catch up. I hope you all had a lovely, restful summer season. And I look forward to bringing you the podcast for this season. We've got some really amazing people that are coming on. We've got a sponsor. So that's really cool. And we wanted to try and work with sponsors that were very, very aligned with what we do. We don't want it to feel like we're selling things because we're not. It's essentially us promoting them in exchange for them keeping the podcast alive. The podcast to survive long term needs some money coming in. So that's what that is. It's going to be a very aligned exchange with some different brands. And we hope that everyone is along for that ride too, because it will mean that the podcast can stay for as long as we have some sponsors on board. It takes a lot of time out of our week to do this and we love it, but to keep it going, we do need to get something back. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So our sponsor for this season is probably someone you've already heard of. She's been on the podcast. I've been using her products for a really long time. And that's one of the reasons that I said yes. It was a full body yes to her being involved in this project of sponsoring the podcast. So it is Elle from Australian Medicinal Herbs. So Elle lives up around the corner from me, and we met just online, I think, through a local gardening group. And I realized that she ran Australian Medicinal Herbs. So it's a medicinal herbs company. She has a range of teas and tinctures, and they help with a range of different things. My first trial or dabble into it was when I got sick in winter, and she gave me some of her mullein tincture. So mulleins a beautiful fluffy plant, and she harvests it all locally, and it's all ethically sourced and organically sourced, which is lovely. It's not shipped in and then highly processed somewhere here in Australia. It's beautiful. It has a lovely green color, has a very earthy taste. And mullein is used as for lung health and respiratory health. So it's a really good expectorant. So if you've got mucus and things like that in your lungs, that's why we were taking it. So we got sick. We just got smashed, our whole family. I didn't use the tea so much. I used the tincture a lot. My husband used the tea and he really liked the taste of it and found it quite effective. But the tincture is just like an under the tongue dropper. So we were using that. We had the alcohol version for us. The tinctures are lovely because they're very quick acting. So that's why we jumped on that bandwagon. And then the kids actually had some too, a glycerin version. So it's safe and healthy for kids, doesn't have alcohol in it, and it tastes sweet. So they were happy with that as well. And we found it really worked. I mean, we were coughing, and it did help soothe that. But more than anything, it just helped bring all of that too much information, mucus up. You don't want to visualize that too much. Sorry if you're having your breakfast or your morning coffee, but it is super effective. Something to definitely have in the medicine cabinet coming into a change of season when it comes to winter and all the winter illnesses as well. It would really help with all of that. So yeah, something to stock in your medicine cabinet. It's just something you can reach for. It's natural, it's full of the good stuff. So yeah, that's my experience with mullein tinctures. If you want to learn any more about her range, you can jump on our Instagram page and there's a link, and you can also get a discount for shopping with Elle. We've got the code in the show notes. So jump in there, click on the link, and you can have a look at her beautiful, beautiful products. Okay, so we have Sabrina Hahn on the podcast today. I interviewed her back in December. She lives in Perth, so it was really interesting coming into the hot weather. She's got a lot of experience with dry climates, with heat waves, those kinds of things. She has a book about gardening, and it's all about the practical basics, which very much aligns with us here at the Practical Permaculture Podcast. She has an effervescent personality, which you will see. She loves her naked gardening day. She's actually naked on the front cover of her new book. She's just such a lovely lady. So thank you, Sabrina, for coming on and giving us your time. I really hope you guys enjoy our chat today. And as always, jump in the Facebook group. We can keep chatting about the podcast or other things. We do lots of things in there, like sharing our gardens, giving tips and tricks. So yeah, we'd love for you to join us. And let's get into the chat. Hello and welcome, Sabrina.
Well, hello from over here in the hot west.
Yes, we're recording this in December. And what did you say it was going to be today? 30?
It's only going to be 37 today, but it'll be 40 tomorrow, which is something that as gardeners we all dread.
Yes, yeah, those extreme weather conditions can really
yeah.
wreak havoc, can't they?
Yeah, I know. It's just, but I think all of Australia's experiencing climate change, Alysse, and that's what we're in for. So best that we prepare ourselves for it and get more trees in the ground is what I say.
Yes, for sure. So for people who don't know who you are, you've been around for a long time in this kind of gardening and horticulture space, but can you tell us a little about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I come from a very, very long line of passionate and obsessive gardeners. And as a child, my father was an engineer, and so we moved around a lot, but we went to remote areas. So we started off in New Guinea, in Lae and New Guinea. And then the family moved up to northern Queensland above Cairns in the Daly River. Then we moved from there to the Snowy Mountains. Totally different climate, I have to say. And for someone that didn't like wearing clothes or shoes, I certainly learnt to wear them when we moved to Cancoban. And then we moved to inland New South Wales, and then we moved to northern New South Wales. So and my mother and my grandmother, it didn't matter where we went or how long we were there for, the first thing they did was to put a garden in. So they were avid veggie gardeners, veggie and fruit gardeners, but I think I grew up in permaculture before I knew what permaculture was. So what they would do, my mother and grandmother, is they looked at the land, not just where they were, but the entire landscape and how to work with the landscape rather than against it. And my father was an amazing bushman. and he spent many years working with Aboriginal people in remote areas. And they taught him so much about the native fauna. So I had both of those influences right from the word go. So I didn't realise until I read my first permaculture book when I was probably 17. I thought, that's what I am. I'm a permaculturalist, but didn't know it.
There's a name for
And
that.
yeah, there's a name for what we do in the garden. And because gardening was always my passion, so I went on and studied horticulture and then a degree in applied science. And then I was interested in the social aspects of what being in outdoors and nature does. So then I did a degree in social science as well. So that's my
Wow.
background, really.
Yeah, yeah. And where have you landed now? You're over in Perth.
Yeah, so I came to Perth 45 years ago, but still went back to New South Wales on a very regular basis, visiting family. But I fell in love with the landscape here because it's vast and the flora
Yeah.
is extraordinary. So I fell in love with the flora and I started up my own landscaping business, but I went broke because I was putting in native landscapes, like native plants, and everyone over here wanted an English cottage garden. So,
Really?
yeah. So I just went, and this
Why do
is
you think that is?
because I don't know. Well, I have to say, when I first arrived in Perth, I was astonished how many English people lived here. Like every
Okay.
third voice had an English accent. And so I guess they wanted to replicate what they had at home.
Mm.
But with no understanding of climate or so I just thought, well, let's not bother with that. And this is 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, no one
Yeah,
wanted
sure.
native gardens. So
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
pursued media. So I thought, bugger it, I'm just going to influence people. um,
Just convince them.
so
Just convince them anyway.
that's what I thought. Education, education. So
Yeah.
I did lecturing at TAFE and then I got a job with ABC Radio and that is now 33 years ago. And I have
Oh,
worked,
congrats.
yeah.
That whole
So
time.
I know. So I started in Kalgoorlie. So Kalgoorlie is in the
Yeah.
goldfields in the middle of the desert, and people were wanting to put in, camellias, azaleas, and everything that sizzled in 50-degree heat. So I worked part time in a nursery, and there I could influence people on what to buy to put in their gardens. And I also worked
Yes.
on Goldfields Radio. So, and then after that, I thought, holy moly, this is great. I can influence people. So I set about a course of trying to encourage people to love the landscape they're in. And now my role
Mm.
is very much I want people to think of their garden or their block as a shared space to encourage habitat support and biodiversity. So that's my big push these
Yeah.
days.
And do you have any plants that you love recommending or that you have in mind that specifically speak to encouraging biodiversity and considering like the local landscape?
Absolutely. Well, I think with changing climate now, people are really looking at canopy cover. And if you live in an urban environment,
Mm.
Perth is disgraceful. We have the lowest canopy cover of any city, and we're the hottest and
Wow.
driest. So, and when you look at a tree, and this is part of the permaculturalist in me, I like a tree to have more than one purpose, so more than just shade. So I want it to either give me
Mm.
food or to give other species food. So we have critically endangered possums and cockatoos here. Some of my trees are for the cockatoos and possums. Some are for fruit trees for me. Mind you, the cockatoos fairly love hooking into them.
Get those two.
And some are, big canopy trees where it provides shade and cools the environment.
Yeah. Are you on a big block?
I am for a city. Yeah, I'm on 1,000 square meter block, which is very rare these
Okay.
days. So, and I'm a plantaholic. So when I see a plant I haven't got and I love, I go, oh, I have to have that one. So my garden is
Ah,
packed.
packed full of all
Yeah.
different things. Yeah, cockatoos, we have that problem. Our current problem is possums. Have you got any advice about possums?
That are eating your trees, you mean, or that are
Eating
endangered? Oh, they're
everything.
eating everything.
Nope,
Yeah.
they're eating everything. We've got
Yeah.
a bush block and we've got a few trees with big hollows, so they definitely live on our block.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to give them some stuff, but I
Yeah,
do
but
want to
not all of
actually
it.
harvest some vegetables
I don't know of anyone that actually that is able to keep possums off your
successfully.
trees successfully. I
Oh
know, but
no.
a lot of it too is habitat loss. So, our possums are critically endangered, so we're doing everything to get them to breed. And I've just returned from Tasmania, and oh my God, they are just wiping out everyone's gardens.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Well, I think that's the case where we are. They've got acre and a half blocks that we're on. That's like a new subdivision. So they've cleared a
Yep.
lot of land. There's big nature strips and pockets all through it, and we're surrounded by bush. But all of our neighbours have just cleared their blocks flat, and we've got about 12 big gums and then some shrubby that we've left at the back. And obviously they love living there because, there's a lot of other things that have been cleared. So we're just trying
Yeah.
to net and physically protect stuff, and
Yep.
I'm going to plant some stuff down the back of the block and just let them kind of free range there. So then hopefully it
Yeah.
encourages them to go down that
Yeah.
way instead of towards my
Yeah.
garden. But one of those
And that's
things, isn't
really
it?
that's the only thing you can do is boundary planting. And find out what
Yeah.
their favourite trees are, although they will go to just about any tree. So I don't know if they actually have a favourite because they seem to eat just absolutely everything, and they're
Yeah.
protected, of course. So, I mean, in New
Yes.
Zealand,
Yeah.
they just kill them, but you can't do that here. And it's really down to habitat loss. So yeah, it's a hard one, that one. Apart from what they do in Tasmania with their orchards, they literally net the entire area, which
Yeah, they
is
just build like 10 by
costly.
10 walk-in
Yep.
kind of,
Yep.
yeah.
And that's where they grow the plants that they really treasure.
And so you talked about Perth having not a lot of green space or having the least amount of green space.
Yep.
What do you think the importance in managing green space and encouraging that in cities and the effect that's having on climate change?
Well, what's happening over here, because the groundswell is happening from residents through local governments. So the local government associations are doing the most fantastic job of trying to get trees in the ground, and they're working with
That's
community.
good.
So in the areas where the cockatoos fly over, the critically endangered ones, and there's no food for them. What happened last summer, it was so severe that none of the banksias set seed and very few of the eucalypts set seed. So there's no food for them. And then on top of that, we have massive clearing, massive habitat clearing. So the local government, so people have gone, what can we do as an individual? We need to do something to cool our cities down, because there's no political will from the state government here. So the LGAs are picking up, well, it's people power. So everyone's gone to their local council and said, the state government are not going to do anything about it. We want to do something. We want to plant trees. We want to put in food trees for cockatoos. We want to put in nesting trees for all the birds. We want to cool the city down. So they have been doing a massive tree planting program, and there's neighbourhoods that are now set up within local government associations that are doing corridors, even if it's just down their street, of food for cockatoos. So I think I'm really excited by this, because if you wait, the problem with federal and state governments is it takes 20 years for them to actually get into action.
Yeah.
Whereas the
Yeah.
local governments and so now, we've all said, well, state government has to support local government in growing the trees, planting the trees, looking after the trees, and then the neighbourhood will carry on looking after the trees. So in the last 2 years, it has been really exciting to see how the whole community have just gone, okay, let's work together on this.
Yeah, so cool. And is there somewhere, if people are wanting to do that kind of thing, that they should look to? Is it just their local government?
They
or are
just
there
go to
specific
their
groups that...
go to your local government. There's also Facebook groups. So in every area, they like in our suburb, we've got our own Facebook group, and we can organise through the Facebook group planting days, information sessions, how to put the plants in the ground. The local councils put on free workshops for everyone to talk about how to look after that tree, how to plant it, what trees will go with what. So they are doing workshops throughout the entire year. So there's many. So your Facebook groups, your local council, and there's a lot of Save the Wetland groups and Save the Carnaby Cockatoo groups. So, and they're all, these are all community groups.
All grassroots stuff.
Yeah, it is grassroots. Again, permaculture.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting. There's a lot of councils now starting to adopt different, verge planting policies, and they're trying to make it a bit easier for people to say, okay, well, these are the rules. You might need to think about, a car door opening or how it's going to affect things. So I think that's a really good place to start too, like seeing if your local council has a verge policy or guideline or something like that, because that can be really helpful in knowing where to start.
Absolutely, yeah. And you need to abide by those guidelines because, they're there for pedestrian safety. So you really need to know about those and follow those.
So you've just brought out a book and the cover's a little bit cheeky. Was that your idea, Sabrina?
Well, because of my early days in New Guinea, I found it very difficult to keep clothes on when I was young. So that was the editor's idea, actually, because she said,
lovely.
We want a front cover that reflects your personality. So she said, why don't we get you in the nick in your garden? I went, great idea. I'm up for that.
Let's do it. And you have such a bubbly personality, so it captures you,
It certainly does. And it was heaps of fun doing the photo shoot because it was, I'm in the middle of the suburbs. So, and there were works on a house being built in the back garden, in the backyard. And I thought, well, it'll either make their day or break it, one or the other.
They'll have something to talk about at Smoko.
Yeah, absolutely. And I celebrate International Naked Gardening Day every year. And it falls on a Saturday. So I always go into the ABC in very little. And I encourage all our listeners to get involved in Naked Gardening Day.
I love it. And some people take gardening so seriously. So I love that there's that playfulness. Because, people get overwhelmed sometimes too with all the advice and do's and don'ts and products. Like, what's your take on that and like having fun and being lighthearted in the garden?
Yeah. Well, I wrote this book, How to Do It in the Garden, which actually is how to do everything in the garden. Well, not everything clearly, but so I looked at the. I walked into, Bunnings, into the big hardware stores in the garden section, and I thought to myself, if I didn't know anything about gardening, I'd walk in here, look at the 5,000 products that are in there, and just go, it's all too hard. I got no idea, and walk out. So I wanted to write this book with humour, with really down to earth information on the how to get started. So written from that perspective. If I didn't know anything, where would I start? So and of course I've started with soil because plants don't grow because of fertilizer. Plants grow because of the biology in the soil. So that's a big chapter, but I haven't made anything too scientific or complex. It's riddled with humour all the way through, because you should never take gardening seriously. I look at my garden as a shared space, and it's play. I have so many birds coming in. I have a myriad of insects. I have, carnivorous plants. I have murderous birds. I have assassin bugs. All of that, and it's fascinating, and it's fun. You just go out there and have. I've got grandchildren. If you put a kid out in a garden, just watch what they do. They just play with stuff. That's what I want people to go in their garden and just play.
Yeah. And so many people are scared of failing too and getting it wrong, but that's just part of it, isn't it? You have
no
to.
getting it. Yeah. I don't think there is getting it wrong. I think you need education on how to get started. But when stuff dies, that's a lesson. So you dig it up, you look at the root system, you look at the leaves, you try and figure out why it died. And I persist with plants I know I can't grow, and they die every year, but I'm up for the challenge. So
what's your soil like there?
Shocking. We garden on beach sand. So most people live on the coastal plain, right near the coast. So you are gardening on ancient sand dunes. It is gutless. It is hydrophobic. Just if you put water on it, it's like it screams and runs off. It's a really ancient landmass that's had no geological renewal for 97 million years. So there's no nutrients in it. And people come here and they go, how the hell do you bloody grow a garden in Perth? Well, I spent the first 10 years building up the soil.
Yeah.
But because I want to grow
you do that
veggies.
mainly just organic?
Yeah, I am very much an organic grower. I've been in this garden for 24 years. It has never had a pesticide or a herbicide put on it. There's lots of carnage and murder. Murder occurs every day with everything.
Maybe that could be your next book, Murder in the Garden.
So I have a whole ecosystem here. It's fabulous.
Yeah. And what's the main way you put back into your soil? Like, is it through seaweed or is it through just organic matter, like, compost? Like, how do you recommend to build that soil health the most?
I put everything. So I make my own compost because I've got a big block and I've got lots of plants, so I can shred it, put it in the compost. So I have lots of garden waste. I can't put veggie scraps in the compost because the rats, you've got possums, I've got rats. So I make my own compost. I put in biochar, I put in organic manures. I've got a friend she's got lots of chickens, so I take some of her stuff. Use an organic slow release mineralized fertilizer because we've got no minerals in our soil here. So I have to fertilize all the fruit trees and my veggie garden. But it's all sort of organic. So I'm a big supporter of biochar. I think biochar really holds on to nutrients, and I've got worms and I use wormweed, I use seaweed products, so and basically it's like a closed system here. So the bin that goes out has very little in it.
Yeah, and we're similar to you. So our podcast is for people kind of just starting out on that journey. So can you maybe explain what biochar is for those people that might not have heard of it before?
Okay, so biochar is made from when you burn wood, but you do it in a way that oxygen doesn't get into it. So it's a very, very slow burn over a long period of time at a set temperature. So it's done without oxygen, and there's a big mallee farm here where they use the mallee for oil, for eucalyptus oil. So they have a closed system on their farm. So all the wood part that comes from that, they have this massive big it's like an incinerator, a closed incinerator. So all that waste wood goes into that, and they make oil from the leaves, and then they make biochar from the waste. So what
Excellent.
biochar does basically is it's incredible for holding on to nutrients and then slowly releasing those nutrients into the soil. So because we think of plants needing to uptake nutrients through their root system, which they do, but they rely on microscopic fungi and bacteria to deliver and dissolve those nutrients. So biochar has a role to play in that as well.
Excellent. Thanks for explaining that, because a lot of people hear it, I think, and don't fully understand what it does or what it is, and obviously very different to like wood ash and those kinds of
very different
inputs that you can have in the garden.
Very different.
And so you obviously talk to a lot of people through your role in nurseries and obviously on the ABC and writing books and those kinds of things. What do you think are the most common gardening mistakes people are making, and maybe some things we can do to avoid making those mistakes?
Yep. I think the biggest thing you have to do is understand what soil type you are in, whether you're in clay, sand, loam. God, if you're in loam, you're in garden heaven. You have to understand what your soil is like. And in the book, I talk about how to know what your soil is and then how to amend the soil if you're in really alkaline soil or acidic soil. Even though you can amend the soil and make it better, essentially if you're putting trees in, remember that the tree roots are going to get down into the deeper soil plane where the amendments are not there. Even though most plant roots gather their nutrients between 30 to 50 centimetres, that on top of the soil. So you really need to understand before you buy anything or do anything, you need to know what soil type you've got. Go and buy a pH soil testing kit. That tells you whether your soil's acid or alkaline or neutral. If you're growing veggies, most veggies need to grow around the 6 to 6.5. So rather than going out and spending a fortune on plants, just find out what your soil type is, and then you can amend the soil a bit, but I really recommend that you go for plants that grow in that soil type. Growing veggies
pH is a big one.
And growing veggies, even if you are buying compost or soil conditioner from a landscape yard, test it. Ask them, do they test their soil? You want to know what's in that soil, because there's heavy metals in a lot of soils.
We got a big trailer load full of soil because we're on really, really heavy clay where we are. And we've been building up our hedge on a mound with just organic matter, and then pocket planting with some good quality soil just to start that process, because we're getting hammered by the wind and the sun and there's just nothing there. So we kind of wanted to get going. But the first lot of soil that we received, my husband went and picked it up, brought it home, and I opened the tailgate and I got this instant headache. I was like, what is in this soil? It was ridiculous. And I ran and got my pH kit, and it was sitting at a 10.
So I would say, that's terrible. See, what happens is with a lot of the chicken farms, they pick up the fresh, so it'll be full of ammonia probably. Like if I'm doing a really big project and I haven't got enough compost, I get it from people that I know, how they make the compost, what goes in it, and it's all tested. They test it all the time. So that's a really good trick for young players. If you are going to a landscape yard to buy veggie mix or soil mix, you have to ask them what's in it, and you want to know what the pH. If you go to a landscape yard and you say, what's the pH of this soil, and they look at you with a blank look going, I've got no idea what pH is, go
Walk
somewhere
away.
else.
Walk
Yeah,
away.
walk
Yes.
away, walk
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Well,
And
see,
I
we're
guess,
new to the area, so we don't know anybody.
yeah,
We've only moved here very recently, so we kind of just took some advice from people, bought it. I should have gone in myself, but I had the kids with me. My hubby just bought it and came home, and I was like, oh my goodness! And we
yeah,
found a much better one locally for when we want to
yeah,
do our big projects. But
yeah,
oh man, that was a expensive lesson, and it's just
yeah,
been sitting there for 6 months trying to kind of get some stuff in it and neutralize it a little bit,
yeah,
and let it rest, because it was just like you
yeah.
can't plant in that.
No, 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 no. There's no way to just burn all the roots of everything.
Mm.
And I guess the next thing is, if you put in 6 broccoli and 5 die, your legs are not going to fall off. Like it's a plants die,
Yeah.
and you will have some failures, but it doesn't mean to say
Yeah.
that you will always have failures. Try again. It's not such a big deal if you're on a really tight budget. And when I moved into my place, I separated. I had no money whatsoever. The garden was non-existent, and I had no money. I couldn't do anything. So I started making my own compost, and then there were just 50 million weeds, and I don't use herbicides. So I got a massive truck of sheep poo from a farmer who doesn't use herbicides and pesticides. I spread all that, and because sheep poo has heaps of weed seeds, I went to a warehouse. It's a carpet warehouse, and I got all their offcuts out of a skip bin, and I lay the offcuts of carpet over 50% of the backyard over the top of the sheep poo, and I left it there for a year. And when I peeled it off, I had worms. It was beautiful. But I didn't do anything with that patch for a whole year. So,
And I think that's a lesson in patience. I'm the most impatient person in the world, but when you actually do put some thought into it and have a little bit of a plan, and you do
yeah,
those things, like I got over eager, and the blocks across from us, they slashed the paddocks, and I thought, oh yes, free grass, and I
yeah,
can chuck it all in, and now I'm
yeah,
paying for it because
yep.
there's just weeds coming up everywhere all through
Weed
this
seeds.
grass.
Oh,
Yeah. And I thought, it's free, I'll go get it and I'll layer
yeah,
it
I
in my
know.
garden bed.
I know.
But
We
there's
all do it.
so many
Oh,
weeds.
free manure seeds for the next 15
Yeah.
years. So planning,
Yeah.
just be patient. The other thing people have to do is, I always recommend that you just take your foot off the pedal for a bit. Spend your time, get a worm farm, put a compost in, do all those lovely little things. If you haven't got rats that are a bad problem, all your veggie scraps, bury them in the ground. They break down really quickly. But spend a year watching where the sun goes and because every season the sun is in a different spot. So people go, because they move in midsummer and they go, oh, this is all in full sun, it's great. And then in winter, no sun gets to that spot whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you really need to, and have a look around, go for a walk around the neighbourhood, see what grows. And even if you start with your pioneer plants with that until your soil builds up, or you can get enough, stuff to, in clay, you have to mound. And I live in pure sand. My daughter lives in Wagga. She's in heavy, heavy clay. And so when I get there, I go, oh, it's like being back at home when I was a kid, in heavy clay. So that's what I mean. You have to understand your soil, and it requires different things entirely.
Yeah, and the sun thing's a good thing to keep in mind. But I always forget. I go, oh yeah, that was sunny, and so I think also documenting it a little bit, like whether it's taking a photo or writing some notes down, because you so quickly forget. I mean, who hasn't gone in and put seeds in the ground and gone, oh, I won't label it, I'll remember what they are, and come back
You
3
got
days
no
and already
idea.
forgotten what they are. let alone what the sun was doing in winter last year. So,
I know.
documenting it, taking photos, that really helps with that process especially when you're first starting out.
Absolutely. And iPhones are great because you take photos of when things are fruiting, flowering, and you just go back and you go, oh, that happened on the 5th of May. And the other thing is seeds. Like I save the seeds because I grow heritage veggies. Never put seeds in a jar and think that you will remember what they are, because you certainly will not.
You definitely, exactly. And all the brassicas look the same, don't they? The
Exactly
broccoli and the cabbage
same.
and just little round seeds.
Yeah, you wouldn't know. You would not know.
And for those starting out, how important is it also to understand the climate, like the area that you're living in when you're choosing plants?
Everything. Climate is everything, and it's changing. Because the gardens that we had in New South Wales, there's no way I could ever grow them here, not in a million years. So even if you nurse things along, say in our climate, winter, beginning of spring and autumn, you can put plants in the ground and go, like, I love tuberous begonias. And every year they die. As soon as we get a 40-degree day, and it doesn't matter how much you water them, gone. So there will be things that you love and you want to grow. So when you are first starting out, go to places that grow that stuff really well. And it's okay that you can't, like the magnificent verticordias and banksias we have in Western Australia. They can't grow. You can't grow them in New South Wales. It's too humid. The soil is too good, and you get summer rainfall, and that's death for those plants. So you have to come to terms with where you live, and if you fight against the environment, it's going to cost you a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of disappointment.
We found our local land care have a nursery, and that was a really good place for us to start because it was all things that were super local to the area. So that's kind of where we started, with just what was really, really local, what's going to do well and grow quickly, so that we can have that first generation of plants, if you like, on the block to support what comes next.
Yeah. So that's your pioneer plants. And that's what, for people starting out, don't worry about all the pretty stuff that you love and adore. Get your pioneer plants in, because that changes the microclimate. So once you've got your pioneer plants in microclimate, you've got more humidity, you've got more oxygen coming in through the transpiration of plants, you've got canopy cover, you've got birds and insects that will start coming in, who will be your pest and disease controllers. So pioneer plants first, and at least you're putting something in and you can see it grow, and they will grow successfully, and then you go, woohoo, I'm on a winner.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what we're struggling with, because we've got some of that pioneer species, but we're planting all our veggies and there's just not enough diversity in our garden yet. And I feel like we're just, it's an uphill battle at the moment because there's just not that diversity. We don't have, wind protection yet from our, our borders and things. So it can feel a bit hard at the beginning when you first start out.
Yeah, but you watch the evolution of your garden. It's sensational. Like, I knew I would be here for a long time, so I was in for the long game. And also, when you get older, you think, no, 5 years goes in about one. And then get joy. So put in your pioneer plants and take joy from that and go, I have just added to habitat. I have just made the world a greener and better place. I am contributing to bringing the temperatures down in my local neighbourhood. So sit back and just take joy from that. And, a slow game is usually a pretty good game in nature. It's not fast. Unless you're an assassin bug and you're after an aphid. That's pretty fast.
Oh, it's been so good talking to you. Can we end with maybe if there was one piece of advice that you'd give somebody who is just starting out on this journey?
Yeah. Okay. If there's one piece of advice I would give to everyone who's just starting out on this journey, is that you are the catalyst for change, and you can contribute to a whole ecological system just by putting a few trees and plants in the ground for other species apart from yourself.
That's lovely. And I think sometimes that can feel the pressure of, the climate crisis and everything can feel so overwhelming. But to know you can do something so simple like that and actually have such a profound impact is really, really amazing.
Yep. And I truly believe that. And that's, that's the crux to the book, really.
And so if we're looking to get your book, where can we find it?
Okay, so the book is available. It's in bookstores in all states, and they can also go to Fremantle Press, which is based here, and they're my editors. So you can just Google Fremantle Press and order it online.
Excellent. I have a copy already and I love it. It's such a great book.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yes.
It was fun writing
Lovely.
it too.
Good idea. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy week, especially in the lead up to Christmas, to talk to us.
No, I know. I haven't even thought about Christmas yet, but I'll get there.
Lovely. Well, thank you again.
No worries, Alysse. It was great talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.